Hey guys, I want to give you some help on the final exam because it is a bit of a doozy. Not because the questions are very hard, but because it covers a lot of different information, covers all that stuff that we've learned up to this point. So I wanted to give you a review of the topics that are on it. Okay, so first of all, you've got to remember atmosphere, lithosphere, biosphere, hydrosphere. You got to remember what those things are. Okay, so the atmosphere is where the gases are. Okay, the biosphere is where all living things are. Okay, you just remember the bio means life, so the biosphere is where all living things are. Hydrosphere is where water exists. And lithosphere is the crust of the earth. So it's what's under your feet right now. It's the crust of the earth. Okay. So you just need to remember those, and then you'll be able to answer the questions about those if you remember which one is which. Okay. Okay. You might need to think about what the hydrosphere was like before and after the Ice Age. What effect would the melting ice have on the ocean levels? Okay, next thing is you might need to remember some basic things about government and economics. Okay, so if you were given some descriptions, you might need to be able to tell the difference between a country that has an authoritarian dictator. You might need to tell the difference between the various economies. So if you remember, there's 4 economies of the world. Market is free, so supply and demand determines prices. A mixed economy, okay, where supply and demand determine prices, but also the government can control parts of that with rules and regulations and things. And then there's command economy, where the government controls all aspects of the economy. Okay, think communist command. And then traditional is the 4th kind, and that's where things are traded. And hence the root word trade in the term traditional. Okay, so you might need to be able to identify a description of one of those or more of those and be able to select which one is which. Okay, so remember, market's totally free. Command is not free at all. Okay, meaning in a market, you can buy, sell, trade whatever you want, and the market sets the price. Supply and demand sets the price. In a command, the government says what you can buy, sell, and trade, and they set the price. Okay, and then in a mixed, it's a mixture, some mixture of the two. So for example, the United States is a mixed economy because for the most part, supply and demand determine prices, but the government might make some rules about business, such as you have to pay a minimum wage to your workers. You can't make your workers work more than 40 hours a week without paying them extra, things like that. Okay. And then in a traditional economy, it would be like an old-fashioned thing where I'm trading a bag of rice for some horseshoes for my horse or something like that. Okay, it's a system of trading. Okay. You need to remember that deforestation is an ecological problem. Okay. And if you were to think about some places in the world that deal with deforestation as an ecological problem, probably Brazil suffers the most in terms of deforestation because of the Amazon rainforest and the problem that's going on there. Okay. You might need to know that the internet has impacted global trade the most recently. It's kind of it's globalized almost every industry, meaning we can buy products and sell products from all over the world because of the internet. So think of Amazon, and that you can get pretty much anything you want on the internet. Okay, so you might need to know that the Earth is tilted on its axis at 23 degrees, and that causes the seasons here on Earth. We only have 2 seasons in Texas, but in some places they have 4 seasons, right? And that's because of the Earth's tilt. You need to know that the Industrial Revolution kind of started in Great Britain, okay? You need to know a little bit about the Renaissance in Europe. You might need to know that in Europe there are some things like the Industrial Revolution and the Renaissance, cultural diffusion aspects were slowed because of cultural barriers like mountains, like the fact that Great Britain is an island, things like that. There were actual barriers in the way that kept things from spreading from time to time. Okay, let's see, you need to know that you need to remember a little bit about the Columbian Exchange and some of the things that were traded back and forth. So there were items moved from Europe to the New World, and there were some items from the New World that were taken back to Europe. So you might need to identify some of those things, okay? There's several questions about the Columbian Exchange, so make sure you take a look and you review a little bit about that. You need to know about the effect of mountains on a climate. So, for example, mountains cause a rain shadow. So on one side of the mountains, on the windward side, the wind blows towards the mountain. And on that side, you typically have rain and green valleys, and it's beautiful. But on the other side, we call that the leeward side. The rain does not make it over there. Usually it's blocked. And so it's in a rain shadow, meaning no rain. So on that side, a lot of times you see desert and dry conditions, okay? Speaking of climate, you need to know that latitude has the greatest influence on a place's climate. So latitude is the lines north or south of the equator. So the further you are from the equator, the colder it's going to be, right? And your climate's going to be different depending on where you are. If you're right on the equator in northern Brazil, it's going to be warm all the time. If you're about halfway between the equator and the poles, you're probably going to experience the 4 seasons. And if you are really, really far from the equator, it's probably going to be cold a lot of the time or all of the time. So the greatest influence on climate would be where you're at in terms of latitude, okay? Also, altitude or elevation can affect the climate where you're at. If you're at the foot of a mountain, or if you're at sea level, then your climate's going to be different than if you live on a mountain. Okay, the higher up that mountain you go, the colder the air is going to be. Okay, let's see here. You need to remember the definition of permafrost. Okay, you need to know the definition of permafrost. Permafrost is when the ground is permanently frozen or partially frozen, and it's very hard for most plants to grow in that kind of soil. Okay, so that affects what the ground looks like in a place with permafrost. So like Siberia in the eastern half of Russia, a lot of that is permafrost. Let's see here. You need to know about some other ecological issues throughout the world, environmental issues. So like in Norway, they're overfishing. So there are no more big fish. It's just little fish. And if they keep it up, then some species of fish may disappear. We talked about in Brazil, the Amazon rainforest, they have deforestation going on. That's also going on in Madagascar. And so there's some different ecological issues in different parts of the world. In Oceania, the Great Barrier Reef is dying. So there's different issues in different parts of the world as far as environmental concerns. Let's see. I'd like for you to remember the difference between the Baltic nations and the Balkans. So the Baltic nations are up by the Baltic Sea in Europe. So we're thinking of like Denmark and Germany, those places up there near the Baltic Sea. Those places have controlled themselves throughout modern history, whereas the Balkans, which is in southeastern Europe, those have not controlled themselves all the time. They were part of the Soviet Union for a long time, so those can be confusing because the names are similar. Okay, but you need to remember that the Baltic nations have been independent and controlled themselves. In the Balkans, there's been a lot of war and a lot of invasions down there. Okay, right. Let's see. You need to remember gross national product and gross domestic product. We spent more time talking about gross domestic product. That's all the goods and services produced by a country. Okay. And then there's gross national product, and they are similar, but gross national product is just all the goods and services produced by a nation, no matter where on earth they're produced. So for example, a lot of American countries have factories in, say, China or somewhere. That money counts towards their gross national product. Okay, whereas the GDP, the gross domestic product, when they add up all of that money, it's only the goods and services produced within the boundary of the country. Okay, so if you look up who has the largest GDP in the world, China does, because all of those factories that are owned by the US and other places that exist in China count towards their GDP. But if you would look up who has the biggest gross national product in the world, The United States does. Okay, I hope that's not too confusing. But gross domestic product is, since it says domestic, it's only those things that that appear inside of the boundaries of a country. Okay? It's the opposite of what it looks like it would be, which makes it more confusing. All right. Population growth. There's some things looking at charts and graphs. There's population pyramids. And I think you guys are good at analyzing charts and graphs, so those won't be too difficult for you. There's a few maps and things to look at and some questions about maps on there. Okay, there's a climograph to read. If you remember, we used climographs. We used climographs to play Gang of 14 one time. And climographs show average precipitation, which is rainfall or snowfall, and also the average temperature in a given month. Okay, so I think you guys will be able to read and recognize the climographs. Okay, now, so that's kind of what's on the multiple choice portion. And that'll be 50 questions. I know that's a lot, but we've had a lot of school. Okay, we've had a lot of schooling. So 50 multiple choice questions. And then there's going to be a map of the world that we've studied so far. And there's going to be 34 numbers on there pointing to different countries in the world. And you just need to use your maps that you've created to put what country, or some of them are oceans and stuff, to put what country is which on the map portion of it. Okay, so there's 34 of those, and if you've got all your maps, that won't be very difficult. Okay, that will not be very difficult. Excuse me. So that should take you, if you take 1 minute per multiple choice question, which is what I would recommend, that'll take you a little less than an hour. And then the map portion will probably take you 15 minutes, something like that, 10 or 15 minutes. So you've got an hour and a half, which should be plenty of time. Let me know if you need anything before you take it. Watch this video as many times as you need to. Okay, hopefully it was helpful and didn't make things more confusing. Hope you do an excellent job on it, and I hope you do so well next semester that you'll be exempt from the semester 2 final. Okay, all right, see you guys later.